I want you to imagine, just for a second, that you walk through the doors of a completely new society today. And the moment you step inside, your PhD, your bank account, basically your entire career instantly becomes your biggest liability.
Right. It is a complete, uncompromising psychological leveling. You aren't just, leaving your possessions at the door. You are actively dismantling your own identity.
Which is an incredibly jarring concept to even try to wrap your head around, right?
That's right. But that is the exact reality we are exploring in today's deep dive.
Yeah, it's definitely going to challenge some deeply held assumptions today.
Absolutely. So we are looking at this highly specific spiritual and philosophical text written by Su Feng in May 2012,
Yeah.
and it was translated by Kong Long.
And it has a very striking title. It's called Never Be Arrogant in the Kingdom of the Greatest Creator.
Right. And our mission today is to unpack this text's absolute blueprint for community living. We're going to delve into its, frankly, surprisingly sharp psychological dissection of the human ego. But we should probably establish right at the top, for you listening, we are exploring this text purely as a unique ideological and spiritual framework.
Right, exactly. We aren't here to endorse or validate the theology behind it at all.
No, not at all. We are just objectively analyzing the fascinating way the author attempts to engineer a perfectly harmonious society. And the primary tool for engineering that harmony is the absolute elimination of human pride.
So let's start with the setting, because the text is directed at a very specific group of people, right? It's written for those living in what is called the second home.
Right, which is also sometimes referred to as the new oasis for life.
Yeah, the new oasis for life. And the foundational rule of this community, like the absolute bedrock of the whole philosophy, is that everything received in the community is a gift. It is explicitly framed as a mercy from the greatest creator.
And the author, Shuang, takes that premise to its absolute extreme. The text explicitly states that compared to this divine mercy, any individual's contribution to the community is, quote, nothing.
Wow. Calling a person's life work nothing is a pretty heavy way to start.
It really is. It sets a very clear tone.
But, thinking about it, I would compare it to staying in an incredibly lavish, all-inclusive resort that happens to be run entirely by a billionaire friend.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if you are living completely off their total generosity, like you're in their house eating their food, the idea of complaining about the thread count of the sheets is absurd.
Or loudly bragging to the other guests that you, helped load the dishwasher.
Exactly. It just feels profoundly out of touch.
And that analogy really captures the exact dynamic the text is trying to establish. It uses that premise of total unearned mercy to completely reframe the concept of arrogance.
Because in this framework, arrogance isn't just treated as a minor character flaw, right? Or some annoying habit.
No, it is elevated to a literal cosmic offense. The text actually defines arrogance as a quality of the devil, explicitly contrasting it with the nature of a Buddha.
It also calls it an uncivilized character, which I thought was an interesting phrase.
Yeah, and it refers to it as a weed in our soul garden that absolutely has to be pulled.
Right, the soul garden. But wait, the text also specifically calls arrogance the literal watershed, dividing the celestial from the devil. Hold on, watershed is a very deliberate word choice there.
It is, yeah.
Are they saying arrogance is the actual catalyst that turns a good soul bad? Or is it just a symptom of a soul that is already, flawed?
It is framed as the catalyst itself. It's the structural barrier. I mean, think about what a watershed actually is. It's a dividing ridge.
Like a literal mountain ridge.
Exactly. A drop of water falls on one side, it flows to the ocean, it falls on the other side, it flows to a completely different destination.
So one drop changes the entire trajectory.
Right. The author is arguing that the moment a drop of pride enters your mind, your spiritual trajectory completely fractures.
Because by establishing from day one that all resources and comforts in the second home are divine gifts, the text just preemptively destroys any logical basis for personal entitlement.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Because if everything you touch is a gift, you fundamentally cannot claim you earned it.
You can never look at your peers and say, hey, I built this structure, so I deserve a larger room.
Exactly. If you didn't create the fundamental reality you exist in, you don't get to dictate the terms. The text is basically engineering a mindset where pride just has no oxygen to breathe.
Which is wild, because in the outside world, human society is almost entirely transactional. I do X, therefore I deserve Y.
Right. But in the second home, you might do X, but you still deserve nothing. Y. because your very ability to have the energy or the intellect to do X is in itself a gift.
Which means any sense of entitlement is effectively a rebellion against that reality.
Exactly.
And because entitlement is viewed as this destructive weed, it naturally follows that the author gives this highly specific guide for identifying these weeds before they, take over the garden.
Yeah, the text lays out what is essentially an audit of the ego. It details these very mundane symptoms of arrogance.
And reading through them, I gotta say, they are uncomfortably relatable. Like, very relatable.
Oh, for sure. The author clearly understands human nature. They aren't just dealing in these abstract, lofty spiritual concepts.
No, they are targeting the exact micro-behaviors we all justify to ourselves every single day. First on their list of symptoms is believing the second home would collapse or couldn't sustain itself without you.
Right. It's the ultimate manifestation of main character syndrome.
Yes, we see this all the time in the corporate world, or honestly, even in families.
We really do. And psychologically, the ego does that because it needs to feel structurally load-bearing.
It needs to feel important.
Exactly. If you believe the community collapses without you, it means you hold power over the community.
So the text identifies this as arrogance because it's an illusion of control. You are substituting the greatest creator's power with your own perceived indispensability.
Which is a huge spiritual red flag in this framework.
Another symptom it lists is taking things for granted, making demands, and becoming pessimistic or upset if your requests aren't met.
It is actually fascinating how quickly a simple request can curdle into a rigid demand in the human mind.
It really is. It speaks to how quickly we normalize privilege. The moment a comfort is provided twice, the ego expects it a third time, and then it just demands it a fourth time.
Right. And by labeling that disappointment as a weed, the text forces the individual to constantly interrogate their own baseline expectations.
The text also calls out condemning, criticizing, and ridiculing others, while simultaneously refusing to accept criticism yourself, which, again, very relatable.
Well, that is the ego's ultimate defense mechanism. We criticize others to create distance and to elevate our own status by comparison.
But the moment someone points a mirror back at us, the ego throws up his shield.
Exactly. And in a community that is striving for total egalitarianism, that kind of defensive posturing creates immediate hierarchy. Someone has to be the judge and someone has to be the judge.
And the text has absolute zero tolerance for anyone trying to appoint themselves as the judge. But the symptom that really stands out to me involves how the community approaches labor. It identifies laziness as a symptom of arrogance. But it's very specific about what that means.
Right. It's not just sitting on the couch doing nothing.
No, it specifically highlights the refusal to do dirty and heavy labor in favor of wanting to do office work or wanting to be a leader. It actually views the desire to be a manager as showing off and demanding admiration.
It does, yes.
So I have to push back on this a little bit, just from a practical standpoint.
All right, let's hear it.
From a purely logistical perspective, isn't it just efficient to have intelligent, highly capable people doing office work instead of heavy labor?
I see where you're going with this.
Like, if someone has a brilliant mind for administration or logistics, having them dig ditches or scrub floors seems like a massive waste of resources. Why does the text view the desire for an administrative role as a symptom of a flawed soul?
Well, you are looking at this entirely through the lens of corporate efficiency, right? Where the ultimate goal is maximum output.
Right, getting things done smoothly.
Exactly. But the author, Shu Feng, isn't building a corporation. They're building a spiritual incubator. The currency here isn't productivity. The currency is spiritual equality.
Okay, that makes sense.
The text actually emphasizes what it calls the Chanyuan celestial's quality.
Wait, let me stop you right there. Chanyuan celestial. What exactly does Chanyuan mean in this specific context?
So in the broader context of Shu Feng's writings, Chanyuan refers to this specific ideological and spiritual community. The members actually refer to themselves as Chanyuan celestials.
Got it.
It basically denotes a person who has committed to this specific path, someone aiming to strip away their earthly flaws to achieve a pure, harmonious state of being.
Okay, so when the text talks about the Chanyuan celestial's quality, it is referring to the absolute baseline requirement of humility and egalitarianism needed to be part of the group.
Yes. So it's an identifier for the members, but it's also the standard they're constantly trying to reach.
Which explains why the labor aspect is so crucial.
Exactly. When a person says, oh, I am too smart to do the dirty work, I really belong in the office, what they are fundamentally communicating is, I am above the physical, gritty reality of this community.
I'm above my brothers and sisters.
Right. Even if they are an incredibly efficient administrator, that subtle distinction completely fractures the Chenyuan celestial's quality.
Wow. So avoiding dirty work is just the ego's sneaky way of trying to elevate itself above the collective physical experience.
By demanding everyone be willing to engage in the heavy, dirty labor, the framework essentially forces the ego into physical submission.
You are continually proving, through literal sweat, that you are not above anyone else.
It acts as a physical leveler. In the outside world, we use administrative roles, corner offices, and leadership titles to signal our societal value.
Right, it's all status signaling.
But in the second home, seeking those roles is a massive red flag. It signals that you are craving worldly admiration instead of spiritual perfection.
Which flows perfectly into the text's next major target. Because if heavy labor strips away the illusion of intellectual superiority, the text also has to address the heavy baggage people bring with them from their past lives.
Oh, absolutely.
This brings us to what we could basically call the great equalizer. The text explicitly targets individuals who have achieved high status in the outside world, and it names them without hesitation.
It lists experts, celebrities, high-ranking officials, rich men, and people with doctor's degrees.
Yeah, the author leaves absolutely no room for ambiguity or any kind of exception. It really does not matter how much wealth you accumulated or how many books you published or how many millions of people admired you before you walked through those doors.
The rule is laid out brutally and clearly. Regardless of your past, you must view yourself as the, quote, most ordinary and voluntarily assume the lowest position.
I really try to put myself in those shoes. Like, imagine spending a decade grinding for a PhD or spending 40 years building a massive, successful fortune, only to be told you must mentally place yourself at the absolute bottom.
It is incredibly demanding.
It is. So, is the author asking people to simply forget their past? Or are they actively asking members to weaponize their humility against their own past achievements?
Oh, it is definitely an active, deliberate weaponization. It has to be an ongoing psychological exercise because the ego doesn't just naturally forget.
Right. It holds on to those trophies.
Exactly. And what is so fascinating from a psychological perspective is how the text identifies the exact societal markers that command respect, like doctor, CEO, celebrity, and deliberately neutralizes them.
Because in the outside world, those titles act as the armor of the ego. They protect us from the terrifying feeling of just being ordinary.
We absolutely hide behind our resume so we don't have to face who we are without them.
We really do.
Yeah.
And by explicitly dismantling that armor, the text creates a completely level playing field. But it actually creates a really fascinating paradox, right?
How so?
Well, if a massively famous celebrity and an unknown day laborer both enter the second home on the exact same day, the celebrity actually has a significantly harder spiritual task ahead of them.
Oh, that is a great point.
Right, because they have decades of reinforced ego armor to strip away just to reach that lowest position, whereas the day laborer is already culturally accustomed to being overlooked.
Yes. The higher you climbed in the outside world, the further you have to fall just to reach the starting line of the second home.
That concept alone would filter out a huge percentage of people right at the door. I mean, stripping away a lifetime of achievements, embracing heavy, dirty labor, constantly policing your mind for the slightest weed of entitlement. It sounds incredibly, exhaustingly demanding.
It is all-consuming. It is a full-time mental and physical job.
So we have to ask the big question. What is the ultimate payoff? Like, why would any rational person submit to this level of psychological and physical dismantling?
Well, you would only do it if you believed the alternative was significantly worse and if the reward was infinitely greater. And that leads us directly into the cosmic stakes that are outlined by the text. The author establishes this massive contrast between what we value in the temporary human world and what we should be valuing in the eternal spiritual realm.
The text explicitly rejects traditional worldly goals. It lists them out clearly, fame, power, material comforts, beautiful men or women.
But it goes even further than that. It actually rejects things that many historical cultures consider the highest possible honors.
Like glorifying your ancestors, right? Or securing a reputation that lasts for 100 generations. To have your name remembered for 100 generations is basically seen as the pinnacle of human legacy. But the text just completely dismisses it.
Because in the context of the greatest creator, those goals are incredibly short-sighted. 100 generations is still a finite number. It is temporary.
It's a blip on the cosmic radar.
Exactly. The true goals, according to the text, operate on an entirely different scale.
And the stated goals are perfecting your soul, repaying debts from previous lives, accumulating heavenly treasure, and ultimately gaining entry to the Elysium world.
Which the text basically describes as celestial islands.
Let's unpack that mechanism for a moment, though. How does digging a ditch or rejecting a cushy office job actually repay a debt from a previous life?
It comes back to this idea of a spiritual economy.
Okay, a spiritual economy.
Right. If you accept the premise that your life, your breath, and your comforts in the second home are unearned mercies, you are essentially operating at a cosmic deficit from the start. You owe a debt.
Wow, okay, so if you allow your ego to take credit for your labor, you are claiming the value of that work for yourself.
Exactly. But if you perform heavy, dirty labor with absolute humility, fully acknowledging you deserve nothing, that pure, egoless labor acts as cosmic currency.
So you are paying down your spiritual debt instead of building your earthly ego.
Yes, that is the exact transaction happening.
It is almost like trading in earthly currency for cosmic crypto.
I love that. Cosmic crypto is a highly effective way to visualize it.
Right. You are liquidating your professional reputation, liquidating your ancestral pride, and liquidating your desire for physical attractiveness or comfort, all to buy a ticket to the Elysium world.
The exchange rate is absolute. And the text's architecture is brilliant because it perfectly aligns the physical survival of the community with the individual's spiritual salvation.
Because the text warns that arrogance doesn't just halt your spiritual progress or cause you to make personal mistakes. It explicitly states that arrogance, quote, will become an obstacle to building our ideal community.
Right. Your personal ego physically threatens the structure of the second home.
Which is a huge burden to carry.
It is. The individual's pride is a literal structural threat to the collective Pure Land, and the consequence for the individual is eternal.
The text warns that allowing arrogance to bloom will turn beautiful dreams into a void, leading to eternal regret. You aren't just, like, creating friction at the dinner table.
No, you are literally ruining your own eternal future because you thought you were too important to wash the dishes.
Or because you desperately wanted everyone to know you had a PhD. That paints a very, very stark picture.
When the stakes are framed as literally eternal, the act of complaining about manual labor suddenly seems completely absurd.
Yeah, you're trading eternity for a comfortable desk chair.
That is the exact perspective the author wants the reader to internalize. When you zoom out and view human behavior through the lens of eternity, arrogance is revealed to be exactly what the text labels it.
Narrow-minded, shallow, ignorant, and profoundly uncivilized.
Exactly.
So let's tie all these threads together. We began with the foundational concept of the greatest creator's gifts, that huge paradigm-shifting idea that everything you have, including your ability to contribute, is an unearned mercy.
Right.
From there, we examined the highly relatable everyday symptoms of a devilish ego. Getting quietly furious when a request isn't met, or secretly believing a project would fail without your specific input.
We've all been there.
Oh, for sure. We explored the brutal, leveling necessity of stripping away all worldly titles and assuming the absolute lowest position. And finally, we saw that the ultimate quest, the mechanism driving all this mental and physical labor, is to pay down cosmic debt and secure a place in the Elysium world.
It really is a comprehensive, airtight philosophical ecosystem. Every single rule, every demand for manual labor, every rejection of status, it all directly supports the dual goal of ego death and community harmony.
It requires a level of self-surveillance that most of us couldn't sustain for an afternoon, let alone a lifetime. And I want you, listening to this, to reflect on your own soul garden for a moment.
It's a good exercise.
Think about those symptoms of arrogance we unpacked. How many of those subtle markers of entitlement are blooming in your life right now? Do you secretly think your workplace or your family dynamic would just fall apart without your constant intervention?
Or do you get disproportionately frustrated when a simple preference isn't catered to?
Right. It is deeply uncomfortable to shine a light on those behaviors, but it serves as a powerful audit of the quiet ways our egos demand control.
It forces us to ask what specific titles or comforts we are desperately clinging to and why we are so terrified to let them go.
Which actually brings me to a final thought, drawn from the very end of the text. In the closing lines, the author instructs the reader to, quote, always return to the starting point and fly in the space of the Pure Land.
It's this idea of continuously day after day resetting your ego back to absolute zero.
But it makes me wonder, if true humility requires this constant returning to zero, does the very act of tracking our own personal or spiritual growth actually trap us in a brand new kind of arrogance?
Oh, wow. That is a profound paradox. If you find yourself feeling proud of how humble you have become, or, tracking how many times you chose the dirty labor over the easy task, your ego has just found a new metric to measure its superiority.
Exactly. The moment you measure it, you have already lost the Pure Land.
It is a fascinating trap to mull over.
It really is. Imagine stepping into that completely new society where your past achievements mean absolutely nothing, and your humility is tested with every single interaction. Could you handle the Pure Land? Or are you simply too attached to your armor to ever let it go?
That is a question that fundamentally shifts how we view our own achievements.
Definitely something to carry with us. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.